Welcome to the Silver Creek Insights podcast. I'm your host, Felisa Wiley. Today, we're exploring the intersection of emerging tech, leadership, and systems thinking with someone whose career has spanned defense tech, e-com, and now financial services at the enterprise level. Dr. Josh Simmons has scaled engineering teams at Anduril and led HMI development for electronic warfare systems. Josh, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Fee, thank you so much for having me. Sure, happy to. Yeah, that was a too kind of an intro that you gave me. I'm a bit of a rambler between disciplines. I actually started my career in music a very long time ago. Got into digital synthesis and then eventually media art and applied computer science, which was how I pivoted into web engineering. I was a front-end engineer and a full-stack engineer for many years, and then eventually transitioned into leadership through engineering management. And now I'm currently director of engineering at American Express.
So, okay, music and tech. What happened to lead you in this direction? Can you tell us that story?
Disgruntlement with music. No, not entirely, but partially. It didn't seem like a very good place for a creative person to be at that time. Actually, when I finished my PhD, I looked around for other faculty jobs, and the academy really felt very dogmatic about certain ways of learning and certain ideas. They were very closed off to new ideas, to creativity, to actual innovation. And so I was depressed at that point. I'd set up my whole life tracking towards wanting to be a professor and wanting to have, Dr. Simmons on the door, having students and teaching. I really loved teaching, the bit that I got to do at University of California, Irvine, but just ended up not being the right kind of environment for me to thrive. So after sulking for quite some time, pulled myself up by the bootstraps. I had been doing, plenty of coding for my PhD, but not a ton of web coding. So I refined those skills into learning HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, what have you, to start to get my foot in the door into web engineering. So started at the bottom of the ladder there. After my PhD, it felt like starting over, but at the same time, it felt like a space where I could be creative, surrounded by really intelligent people, which was always the cool thing about academia. It was just exactly the right environment for me at the right time.
Okay, no, that makes sense. And so you worked in many different environments. So you've done defense tech, e-com. What have these taught you about the adaptability of engineering teams?
Sure. Teams take the shape of the problem space that they are working in. And so what I mean by that is if you have teams working at an e-commerce startup, then everything is sort of treated like an e-commerce startup, even the software. You might be going for new flashy tools that are going to get you a leg up on the competition. You have higher risk tolerance. You're constantly selling ideas, just like the e-commerce company is selling and marketing their ideas. In defense tech, everything is aligned around the mission. So there's a certain amount of seriousness that underlies the work. With that seriousness, though, comes a really, really high degree of expertise, focus, intensity around the software that's being written, which is really refreshing, I think, compared to traditional kind of SaaS companies. In finance, to hammer everything is a nail.
No, that actually sounds really cool. I've always been interested in defense tech, but I think it might be a little bit too serious for my personality.
It ranges, right? But yeah, I would say the teams I was on and led were fairly serious, but could also have fun. But yeah, definitely a little bit more intensity than most SaaS companies I've been consulting with or working for.
I could only imagine. And then probably the like the clearance levels, the making sure all like the security protocols are in place. Like I could just imagine, I could imagine the environment that you're in. It sounds kind of stressful, but also kind of exciting at the same time.
Yeah, and I think with that anxiety too, it powers innovation, right? If
Yeah.
you have these really strict constraints and you're given license to work outside of those, as Anduril has been, compared to one of the defense primes where it's very regimented, they're making exquisite hardware like a fighter jet or a tank where there's already a best practice way to sort of build those systems. When you're given license to work with drones or something that's new and it's not really tested out yet, despite that stress, I think because of that stress, it spurs more innovation.
No, I agree with you. And I'm curious, how has your PhD's in applied computer science, correct? So how did your PhD, how has that shaped your leadership style or your approach to these intense environments?
Well, the way that it always comes in handy, two ways primarily. One is winning over a committee, and the second is teaching people. So winning over a committee is the essence of a PhD. It doesn't matter what anybody else tells you, however much they dress it up. At the root of the PhD, it's not necessarily about contributing knowledge to the general sphere of existing knowledge, although you do that. It's about, can you sell a committee on your ideas. And that committee is going to be made up of the most intelligent people that you probably ever meet in your entire career. Very tenured professors, people that have years or even decades in the game. And so the way it works when you go to get a PhD is you do some of your coursework and then you take a qualification exam. Once you take the qualification exam, you're basically certified as being what they call ABD, all but dissertation, which means you do not have to go to classes anymore. You can just conduct your research with your advisor and with your committee. It's awesome. It's the most unstructured time you can probably ever get in your life as an adult, but that's where most people wash out of a PhD program. Is it's you don't have anything on the schedule other than teaching if you're doing some teaching load as well. So most of that time you want to spend meeting with your advisors, soliciting feedback on your dissertation, kicking around ideas, and with that you want to slowly be winning them over so that when you walk into your dissertation defense, which is what you do when the dissertation is fully written, your committee will have had a chance to read it, write notes, start to pick it apart. They'll have anywhere from 2 to 4 hours with an audience where they just grill you on every idea put forth in the dissertation. They try to find weak spots and holes to see how it holds up to scrutiny, to see if it's good enough to be a dissertation, to see if it's good enough to call you doctor. And so the process of winning over that committee, I think, is the most valuable thing that getting a PhD can teach you. It's not anything about the knowledge obtained. It's specifically on how to work with, frankly, because every academic is, difficult people that are hard to win over and very stubborn. So winning over committee comes back time and time again. And then the second bit of that is teaching. Right. I did a fair amount of teaching across different subjects as well when I was pursuing my PhD. And that comes in handy again and again when I'm coaching engineering managers, when I'm coaching engineers, all sorts of people across the board. That level of mentorship and being exposed to that at ground level from the get-go was extremely helpful. So again, those two things would be winning over a committee or selling your ideas or selling your team's ideas to people, as well as motivating and mentoring a team.
Valuable lessons. And I'm curious, what was your dissertation on?
My dissertation was on real-time, high bandwidth, high frequency data visualization in virtual reality. I could see you start to drift off as I was talking about it, which is the correct response.
Woo! Repeat that one more time for me.
Real-time, high frequency, high bandwidth data visualization in VR.
I understand that.
Cool. I'm glad you do. I think I might have understood it less the more I worked in it.
Let's see if my understanding based off of the topic is accurate. So data visualizations within a virtual reality world, high bandwidth, high frequency. So basically it's continuously updated and that's that.
Yeah, exactly. So the big, you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, probably the best way I can say it is you have a ton of fast moving data that's happening in real time. And how do you convey it to the user in a virtual world in a way that it makes sense?
Like a video game.
Like a video game. Exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
I'm immediately, my mind went to one of those virtual headsets where you're probably, I don't know what these games are called. I don't play them. I've seen others play them. You put on the virtual headset, you're in this world, you're shooting zombies, but you're also playing in real time with users from another country. So make sure
cool.
that when your teammate from China is kill that person, look to your left, and you look to your left, it's actually right now when they said it.
That's cool. That's cool. I haven't played any of those. I don't think I've really donned a VR headset since I finished my PhD, and
They're scary.
It was early days at that point. So they were uncomfortable, they were hot, they were heavy. Sometimes the display latency was bad. When it gets over 200 milliseconds, it causes motion sickness really badly. So It was still rough tech at that point.
Okay, it's still not that good. I can tell you that because the last time I tried using one of those headsets, I was so confused. I think I walked into the wall 3 times. I was I didn't know where I was going. Nice. So yes, all of that. So you have scaled teams by 7 times. What are those numbers exactly?
In terms of numbers of people?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So scaled from 2 to 14.
Okay, that is a lot. That is a good amount. Now, what do you think most tech leaders get wrong with rapid growth?
Quality control. And I can empathize with tech leaders because, I've been in this situation. The 7X is one very unique example, very rapidly scaling place that I was working at that point to scale the team. But I'm comfortable with scaling fairly rapidly at lower numbers too, of course. And one of the things that always holds true, and again, I can empathize with this situation, is it's going to be tough because the tendency is going to be to decrease your hiring bar to get people in the door because your engineers are spread thin, especially if you need to scale massively. The amount of work to be done is way outsized to your roster of engineers. Those engineers are going to be suffering. They're going to be working probably more than 40 hours a week, not going to be very pleasant. And so the pressure is going to be on you, the engineering leader, to get those hires in the door fast. And you're going to feel guilty if you move slowly. But it is going to take as much time as it's going to take to not decrease your hiring bar, not decrease your quality bar, to get the right people. Because I can promise you this was a mistake I made, not during the 7X example, but during another bit of scaling at another company. Hiring too quickly, slightly decreasing that bar, and then having projects go completely off track. Because it's not just one person that comes in that's slightly under the hiring bar. When you do that, that attitude spreads to the rest of the team. So if you're hiring for excellence, continue to hire for excellence. Do not compromise. And with that, you have to block and tackle really well for your engineers. You have to say no to stakeholders if there's not capacity. And you have to continuously remind them that the cavalry's coming, that you are working on hiring. So it's a rough spot to be in. It's a really rough spot to be in. It's fun and it's gratifying at the other side of it, but it's a slog to get there.
So for some of the engineers that you've had to bring in like super rapidly, how many days to months do you think it takes like a new hire to feel comfortable in the system?
6 months.
6 months. Okay. So yeah, you can't, that takes time. I was actually going to guess 3 months on my end, but 6 months sounds about right. And imagine that times like, if you've hired like 4 people like at the same time, like the 2 people that you had previously, they're still doing like the grunt of the work, unfortunately, and slowly like a handoff can happen. So I can you can't rush that, unfortunately. Now,
and you get into a mythical man month problem too, where in your example where you went from 2 to 4, now your 2 engineers are also having to spend a significant portion of their day helping out the other 2 engineers on board. So you've actually significantly decreased capacity for your team by adding people.
Yeah. And so you've also helped AI and led like LLM adoption. What are the biggest misconceptions companies have when integrating AI into legacy systems?
2 of them. First is that AI is some sort of omnipotent Skynet that will solve all of your engineering team's issues. And the second, which is somewhat combined with that, or always present with it, is that it's plug and play. So the first, being this omnipotent system that's going to solve all of your engineering team's issues. Everyone's used AI at this point, and they know that it has some pretty dramatic shortcomings. It seems to be the same as any other technological process where the first 90% of the problem is easy. And I think that LLMs have solved, and AI companies have solved the first 90% of that problem towards getting towards, AGI, whatever you'd like to call it. The last 10% will take significantly longer, and a lot of stakeholders, a lot of folks in business that don't have maybe direct interaction with AI at the code level or at the tech level seem to assume that this is a 99% solved problem, but it's about a 90% solved problem. So it needs constant monitoring and maintenance and coaching from the people that are utilizing the AI tools. So you're going to need to upskill your people to use it. The second is that it's plug and play, especially with those legacy systems. The AI solution is going to look completely different depending on what industry you're working in, what tools you're working in, what languages you're working in. Even does it make sense to spin up some kind of RAG in order to access certain docs for the AI to crawl to surface information to your engineers? Does it make sense to spin up a vector database? What data do you train it? Does it make sense to even fine tune a model for your code base? These are all questions that have to be answered in a bespoke way to get the most out of AI, especially with legacy systems where you can't ensure mainstream adoption by the existing mega providers.
No, it is a lot. And it actually just shows the transition that a lot of engineers are going to have to take when incorporating AI into their systems. So of course, they're still going to be building these pipelines, but they're also going to be monitoring. So it relieves them of some of their current workloads, but they still have to be adaptable to what the future is going to bring for them with this new technology. So how do you balance this innovation with risk management when building these solutions?
Sure. This is the boogeyman. I don't think it's as risky as most people want to believe. It certainly is on one hand. If you just give your engineers unfettered access to Gemini, ChatGPT, let's say, maybe they're just going to send a bunch of, like, if you're working for an e-commerce company, like shopping information from their customers out to this LLM. But hopefully they know better than that, but probably somebody is going to do it sooner rather than later. So, generally a bad idea to just give unfettered access out like that. I think that can work at a smaller startup where you have very good quality control. All of the people are quite close and quite aligned with the mission. Everybody can be responsible about it. Plus, you just don't really have time to spin up a huge security apparatus to control this. But I think ultimately it plays into what I mentioned with these systems being plug and play, is you have to roll your own solution. And with that, the model that I found helpful is to start with the broadest solution possible. So again, if you're a small startup, you can get away with using a massive LLM. You're not dealing with a lot of, especially if you're seed stage, you don't have product market fit yet and a bunch of customers. like send it all to ChatGPT. Use Cursor, Windsurf, whatever is going to make your engineers move faster. You're just your code and burn at that point as quick as possible. You scale up a little bit, maybe it makes sense to have another LLM watch what's going between your employees' computers and the cloud LLM provider. There's a number of pretty good SaaS solutions for this now. It's a relatively solved problem that you can say what you would like on a block list and what should be permitted to pass. And then if all else fails, I have a MacBook Air that we're doing this video conference through right now. It has an M chip in it. It was relatively inexpensive as far as Apple computers go, and it can run a reasonable number of models that are actually very helpful completely locally using a Llama.
Mm-hmm.
So if you give your engineers something like M3 Max or whatever the top of the line M chip is in a MacBook Pro, something beefier, they can run pretty much any LLM locally. That is, it's going to have to be smaller parameters. You'll have to stick around probably 8 billion parameters, maybe more if you have a lot of RAM. But you can still get a reasonably good model running completely locally, and that'll work offline. It can be air gapped. It's totally safe. There's no security concerns there unless you don't trust your engineers to scrutinize the code coming out of it. They're putting into their code base, which if you have that problem, you have a way bigger problem than AI at that point.
No, thank you for explaining that. And I kind of agree with you where you said that there's little risk right now because, like, for instance, I think we're all smart enough not to put in, I don't know, like client or secret IDs in any sort of like ChatGPT. Just don't do it. Keep all this private and sensitive information out of it. I think we all know that. But there is like that issue, like that one person who might do it. So I do like the idea of like downloading a Llama and like having your local in the works in the background, because I use that as well. Now,
Nice.
if you could wave a magic wand and give one bottleneck in how companies use generative AI today, what would it be?
It's this safety thing. So if I was a small startup right now, or if I was getting an idea together, maybe for Y Combinator, I know they're doing a bunch of AI themed calls for startups this summer for their summer batch. Be reckless, I would say. Obviously not with other people's data, but what are the things that you could use AI for if security was of no concern? We already have some models, huh?
Everything.
Hopefully, but nobody's done it yet, right? I mean, you have things like Operator, you have a couple of half-baked like agent.exe computer controlling models, you have MCP calling is spinning up, but what if you just built this gargantuan program that is it's hacks APIs, it uses MCP to interact with a crazy number of tools. It can even spin up and apportion its own accounts if you don't have if you want to interact with Airtable, or it needs to interact with Airtable, it can spin up its own account and then use MCP to interact with it. And then if all else fails, it can just control the computer directly. So I would say the magic wand, especially for folks just getting started or companies just getting started, is see how reckless you can be. And you might be surprised with the things that you could get away with and the beauty and interest that might come out of those ideas.
So I'm curious, Josh, what is the most reckless thing you've done?
Ooh, with AI,
Mm-hmm.
I can't claim anything. Well, yeah, I can actually claim a good one. I'll divulge this. So most of my emails go through an Olama screener. It's my spam filter. I have a very, very long prompt that I've worked tirelessly on for a couple of months to get right. And I would say it works better than any other solution on the market that I've seen commercially available. I've tried out Notion Mail. I've tried out Google's Gemini. It built into the Gmail account, and this by far exceeds it. So I have it running on N8N, which is like a no-code self-hosted platform that's invoking Olama. It's reading from the Gmail API, and then it's applying labels, so it's non-destructive. But I have an inbox that's like VIP inbox that is only emails from real people that require a response from me.
That's insane. And has any email slipped through the cracks?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah, especially early days, but I'm able to catch all of it with the prompts now.
Okay, that's pretty cool. How long did it take you to make that?
Probably 2 or 3 months. I mean, proof of concept, like a weekend. These tools are so easy now, especially if you're using no-code platforms like N8N that's making a huge comeback. Zapier, if you just want to throw some cash at the problem and don't care if it's cloud hosted. There's so many of these great no-code platforms that saw a little bit of their 15 minutes of fame maybe about 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and then fell off. And I think that there's just a massive resurgence now with how easy it is to interact with AI tools through these platforms. You don't have to write pardon the language, but a crappy Python script. I kind of hit or miss with Python, but this is highly observable. It works all the time, and it's as simple as just changing your prompt and plug and play into whatever system you want to.
That's really cool. I think there are so many day-to-day applications that creating like an AI or using like a language learning model to applying it to like your day-to-day. Sorry, I'm like messing up this word. Like there's so many ways to apply these applications into your day-to-day. So like for instance, what you were saying, like your own personalized spam filter or like tagging system for email, whether it's something that automatically sends out like responding to some messages, like for a company, if they get like constantly like customers, like sending them like a customer chat support, having like a customer bot, like chat bot going on that like captures like previous messages, and you flag like a good response from a bad response, and like have it come up with something that's similar to the good response but applicable to whatever question was sent. There's so
Ooh,
many ways to like reduce the time that you spend on certain projects. Like I've created scripts that basically take like a week's worth of work and brings it down to like 1 hour. And I'm just
that's
like,
awesome.
that's awesome. And like now your time is freed up for you to do something else with that. And it's amazing because the small amount of time that you may have spent on your mail, just like the tagging and filtering and trying to figure out, it may have taken you like what 10 minutes a day, but that adds up. Like 10 minutes a day in a week is 70 times the amount of weeks in a month times the amount of months in a year, and now you reclaim that. It took some time to build it, but you're still going to save yourself time in the long run. So it's really cool to see like all these different applications.
Well, I'll add on to that too. You said 10 minutes a day, but as you well know, that 10 minutes feels like multiple hours. So perceptual time savings outsize the actual time savings. And I'll say too that this summer on the call for AI proposals for Y Combinator, personal AI is one of them. So I think we're submitting something, right? We're starting a company now.
Okay.
Yeah, we just came up with the
You
idea
just came up with the
through
idea.
this podcast. Yeah,
This is exciting. We're going to have to collaborate offline.
we got to get to work.
So we've talked about your scaling of engineering teams and how it takes about, like you said, 6 months to like fully onboard for an engineer to understand their systems. What, in your experience, differentiates a good engineer and a good engineering leader from a great one?
Sure. I've met plenty from either camp. So this one is really easy for me to suss out. Break it down into two categories. One is going to be busyness. I'll come back and run through that one. And then second is going to be they're non-technical. So the first with busyness, the heuristic that I use is about 5 meetings a day. That's the most that somebody can realistically focus through and realistically give their full attention to and full self to. Maybe some people can go over, some people can go under. I have a similar heuristic for how long engineers can write code in a day. That's different than that. But for managers, for leaders, about 5 meetings, 5 different topics a day. They can work obviously outside of that, but it needs to be focused work outside of those meetings. So just a dead ringer for a leader who is reactive and kind of on the back foot is they have their schedule just clouded up from start to finish all day, probably exceeding 8 hours with just meetings. That's a good flag for meetings that could be emails, unfocused meetings where you're half slacking at the same time. So to me, leaders that are falling into that camp, and I fell into this category for a very long time. Sometimes I still sink back into this trap too. So it's not necessarily judgmental from my point of view. This is the easy thing to do. But when you fall into that trap, you start to operate without intentionality. And without intentionality, you can't protect your engineers. Second thing is going to be non-technical. Engineering leaders, obviously, it's not appropriate for some managers, depending on the company, and definitely not directors, VPs going on up the chain to write code necessarily for the enterprise. However, keeping up to date on tech news and even one level below that, just kind of understanding how these different systems fit together and what the tech trends are is extremely important and something I've seen a lot of people lose track of over the years. So it's important to carve out that time, whether it be, weekends, evenings, whenever you can get a little bit of extra time to experiment with a little bit of new tech, even if you're not writing production code or you're not working on the next great boil the ocean startup in your spare time, to just be hacking away a little bit in your spare time.
So now let's say you're an engineering like manager, and how do you know when it's time to like push your team toward more experimentation versus doubling down on the refinement and stability? Like when is that time?
I don't think that they can go back and forth from my experience. That's a very, very difficult thing to do. So what I would suggest if you're an engineering manager in this situation or otherwise engineering leader is to propose either formally or informally splitting the team up into delivery groups.
Okay.
So one group should follow more of like a skunkworks model. So it's this kind of research and development, high risk, high reward. Most of the stuff you're going to build is going to be wacky and kind of fail, but you're the innovators, right? You're trying the new tech, you're writing the proof of concepts. And the value you're going to get out of that is not many ideas are going to land. Most of them are going to be flops, but you're going to get one that lands every once in a while. And that one idea is going to be a huge wellspring of innovation for the rest of the company and the rest of your engineering teams. Then you hand that over to your other delivery team, which is your more traditional software engineering team. Here's the stack you're working in. You're doing upgrades, you're doing incremental feature additions, but that job is more product focused as opposed to tech focused. And then they implement those new findings as time goes by. So I've had pretty good experience setting those two up. It's actually interesting because when I talk about it, if somebody pitched this to me, I would say, well, I don't want to be in that second group. I want to be in the first group. I want to do most of the stuff that's going to fail. But as many people as I've told that to would say the converse of that and really want to be in the second group and have just no interest in doing the very off the wall kind of free thinking stuff. So these groups seem to also kind of self-segregate pretty well as in addition to that.
What group would you fall under?
The radical experimentation, this probably isn't going to work, but if it does, we're billionaires kind of group.
Okay, I would fall more into the stability group because, like, I feel like once you have those routines, you're kind of sort of just like grooving. You know what you got to do. You know which systems to check. So yeah, that one sounds fun. So there we go. See, we already will make a great team. So we do need to go this business after this podcast.
Sounds good.
So during your time at Anduril, you led HMI. So for those who don't know, that is human-machine interface. You led their development for electronic warfare. How does that work influence how you think about user experience in everyday applications?
That was an incredible experience. Totally changed how I thought about UI. I went in there and I was really, really big into the sort of like West Boss, like over the top YouTuber, take my tutorial, 90% marketing, 10% information kind of thing. Whatever Vercel is pushing, whatever the latest, greatest. It's always got to be latest, greatest, and the most flashy web tech. And the really unique experience I got out of working with that job is it is the first position where I worked very closely with people working on the hardware, the actual equipment.
Sorry.
I'll take it again. It's okay.
Okay, sorry. There was a squeaky toy situation.
It's okay. It's okay.
I'm gonna need you to repeat that. I'm so sorry.
That's fine. Let me take a second. The really unique experience that I had at Anduril was working very closely with folks on the hardware and software teams, both, and all the way up the stack from hardware. I never had that experience before. It's not something that I had ever really thought about. I had built computers before, but that's pretty much like building Lego bricks and checking parts online at this point. It's nothing super uniquely skilled. So to be able to work alongside folks that were working on FPGAs, on embedded software engineering, that for my money is like quote unquote like real software engineering. Like the margin of error is small. Like you got to count for every bit of memory, every bit of power. All of those things come into play. So it's very, very high stakes, and there's very, very low margin of error with those folks. And so with that was reflected in their tools. Also, a lot of them used like NeoVim, Helix. They were pretty anti-UI. So to enter into that space and work with those folks was initially a bit challenging to understand that whole view of tech. But when I came out of it, I had a much different understanding of what makes a good human-machine interface versus what is just flashy marketing and the latest, greatest tech. And for my money, maybe this is a hot take, I think most of what's come out in web over the past 5 years, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. I think a lot, it's kind of like those people who are like, oh, we have to integrate AI, we have to integrate UI. They talk about it like it's this shiny new toy, and they want everything all sparkly, and they throw in a lot of like marketing jargon and buzzwords to capture attention. And it's just like half the time they don't even know what they're talking about.
They want to, you got to walk before you can run.
Yeah, and like, so I'm in agree with you that is a hot take that I am in full agreement with. And so you've mentored many engineers. What is one piece of advice that you find yourself repeating often?
I give this out to everyone at every level I talk to. Define your non-negotiables and then do not negotiate them. It's as simple as that. So if your non-negotiables as a software engineer are, I want to work remote, I don't want to set foot in an office, don't go into an office. You have to accept the consequences of that, especially now. The general mood seems to be pretty anti-remote, unfortunately. So you might have less job opportunities. But if that's a non-negotiable for you, don't negotiate it, because as soon as you negotiate it, as soon as you start going in hybrid or 5 days a week, if you're just a remote person, you're going to be grumpy and your output is going to go down. You are not going to maximize your potential. So same goes for managers as well, especially first-time managers. What are your non-negotiables around morality, especially at an early stage startup? Maybe you'll be pushed to do things that are a little outside of your, moral comfort zone. Don't do them. Get fired over them if that's your non-negotiable. I don't see people sticking up for these things enough, and I understand, there's always other factors at play, especially if you have family or other folks to support. Sometimes there's other factors at play. So you got to make understanding for that. But insofar as you're able to, try to not negotiate things that should not be negotiables for you.
No, that's really powerful. What are your non-negotiables?
Working over 60 hours a week, I would say,
Ooh,
on the
okay.
regular. That's a pretty hard non-negotiable for me. And closed-mindedness,
Mm,
which is a little bit hard to put a pin on. I guess mine have become a little bit lofty. They were probably simpler when I was an engineer.
yeah, it sounds more like cultural. Like you know, like even talking to like in an interview, talking to people, like how their culture is and whether they're just like you have to do this or you have to do this. But I'm also open to like collaborating. Like collaborative environment really changes like the dynamic of the projects that you're working on, your day to day, just even your overall energy.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. And if you work in an oppressive kind of top-down environment, I think again, that's comfortable for some people. It's like here's the rules. Don't color outside of the lines. Here's your paycheck. That's that. I'm not judging it. It's not a bad thing. But I know for me, I stopped being the rock star idea guy many years ago, and I've let go of that since I've traversed the leadership ladder. And now I know that all of the good ideas come from the people that work with me.
Yeah.
So if they don't feel like they're enabled to put forth those ideas and I'm not able to champion them, then I don't really want to do the job.
Yeah, it's not the environment. No, but that's definitely good advice. So you've done a lot. How do you keep learning and up to date with tech news and industry standards and the latest tool and flashy thing that you need to use?
It's all doing for me. I always learn best that way. That's how I learned software engineering in the first place. When I was very young, my dad put a computer in front of me at a very young age. He was lucky enough to get one for work at a time where it was still kind of rare to do it, but they ordered him like a home PC. So I just sat in front of it and I learned it through DOS, and that's how I've always learned things. So for me, keeping up with tech trends, I don't need to be writing production grade software, but these small automations like my spam filter with
Mhm.
AI, even just doing that, like I need to get my hands on it. I need to see how it works and fits together and fail at it to really understand it. So that's the best way I keep posted. Where do I get those ideas? Sometimes from my own pain points in my life. Like, I mean, my inbox fee, if I could show you, it's not pretty without this spam filter. It's real bad. I
Oh
think,
no.
yeah, too many automated lists have my email at this point. I think I probably need to declare email bankruptcy and just like pack up and move and only tell a few people. So it's like that was a true pain point. But a lot of these ideas come from especially my younger engineers, folks
Mhm.
that are still doing a lot on the side. They have a lot of energy. Maybe they have a startup on the side or a project and open source that they're involved in. And so you hear about these things. I heard about one today. My friend, somebody I work with very close to, he's launching his own database that he built from the ground up recently. So like, I'm not sure how that's going to go. I don't even really know how to evaluate this new kind of database that he's building, but it's interesting. And the fact is he's getting his hands on and he's doing it. So I learn about these new tools from people and then I have to get my hands on and implement them.
No, I actually like that when another person tells you to use a tool because that's someone that you know and trust and have like worked with. Because that's when you know like it's already been filtered through like someone else, and now it's my
Yeah.
own. You use Gmail, right? Do you want to hear my email hot take?
Oh, please.
So, are you familiar? You AOL, Yahoo. You remember those days? Do you remember how bad Yahoo's spam filter was?
I never used it for email. My wife still confusingly has a Yahoo Mail account though.
You need to check her inbox because it is terrible when it comes to spam. Gmail's now getting as bad as it.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. I could see that. Notion Mail seems to be kind of the new hot thing on the block. It sits on top of your Gmail account and
What's
does spam filtering.
is Notion mail through like Notion?
Mhm.
Ooh, okay. Hold on. We have a little visitor here who wants attention.
Yeah, who's the third guest? Wow, what's his name?
This is George. George wants to talk about emails and bite my finger.
Hi, George.
He's
I
gonna
think we
bite the
should
mic.
spin up.
That's what he's doing. Get
He
down.
wants to talk about his George Mail
He
account.
wants to talk about his Jordan mail. Oh, he's still down here. He needs attention. But we have two more questions. Um,
Sure.
I know we're a little bit over time. Is that okay?
Oh yeah, fine with
Okay,
me.
perfect. So, what does impact mean to you in your current role, and how has that definition evolved over your career?
I alluded to this a little bit earlier, where it's a continual process of letting go. Every time you step into a new role, a new level of seniority, you have to let a lot of conceptions about yourself die off. And initially, it's I think the hardest when you go from IC to the first time, because all of a sudden you can't hop in and grab the keyboard, or else you're gonna keep people on your team down. You're gonna stop them from developing skills. So at that stage in my career, impact went from delivering and being like the star that could save the day and launch code and fix production issues to being the person that was clearing a path for my ICs to do that. And now, my past role is a senior engineering manager and my current role is a director. Impact is how well do I develop leaders? And it took me a while to settle into it, as I think it does every role. You come home some days, especially in the early day. And this is something I've just been telling one of my employees who just became software engineering manager. Yep. Is a big win. It was a big win. I'm very proud of him. But I told him, when you step into this role, you're going to come home a lot of days and you're going to talk to your wife. You're going to talk to your family about your day. And you're going to reflect and you're going to be like, I don't know if I actually accomplished anything of worth today. I don't know that I actually moved the needle or helped anyone. And I have no proof that what I'm doing is working. Eventually, you develop those senses over time. But I think that plays very closely into impact. So it's changed for me over time, again, from delivering to making a team deliver to eventually now am I developing the next generation of leaders well.
It's actually crazy that you think about that because you really don't know how you impact people. And it could be in like subtle ways where it's like you just told someone a good job and like that was the first time that they heard that day and they really, really needed this like tiny win and it completely just like made them happy. They but you don't know what it does. So it's actually, how do you quantify being an engineering director, like the impact? Like how do you can't.
You can't. I think you can, but it becomes fuzzier and longer time scale. Again, I'll give the three examples. It's easiest to kind of see it as a progression because I'm somewhat fascinated by this. So as an IC, you get the dopamine hit right away. You ship the code, you look at the feature, product makes an announcement about it. I helped build that, or I built the entire thing. You feel good right away. There's your impact. I did that, the thing that I can point at. And then as an EM, the impact isn't daily. It's probably by sprint, somewhere between by sprint and by quarter, where, hey, my team's velocity improved, or hey, we developed a lot of meaningful features that brought in a lot of revenue for the business. So there's different ways of quantifying it as an, but you'll know it longer term. And then as a director, I don't really think you see the results of that, at least in my experience, until 6 months, maybe a year, until you see people starting to move up the chain. Are they getting promoted? Are they moving into more senior roles? How are they mentoring their people and developing over time? So it might not crunch down to an exact metric or number, but you can certainly tell when you start to look at the quality of leadership in the next rung under you, if you are doing a good job or not. And then, of course, there's also, these indicators, revenue. Are you being a good steward of the company's resources, which are also very, very important?
Yeah.
I don't want to minimize that, but I'd say the reason I got into this and the reason I care about it the most is developing the next generation of leaders.
So looking 5 years ahead, what do you think will be the most valuable skill for this next generation of software engineers or software engineering leaders that isn't being taught widely today?
Paradoxically, it will be the exact opposite problem of what people are optimizing for today. We reached this high watermark of leak code being the gold standard for interviews, where everything is, yeah. I saw your pupils shrink a little bit. That's the correct reaction. Yeah. Which, by the way, I'm going to need you to solve this matrix question real quick on the call. Exactly. It's horrible. So, do those things have their place? Like, yeah, absolutely. Like, you need to see if somebody's worth their salt, but are they the end all be all to the exclusion of everything else as they've been treated, especially over the past couple of years? And especially if you're a smaller company, like a seed stage startup, Series A, Series B, and you're interviewing like Google, Google's got different problems to solve. Your interview format shouldn't be the same. So that's the skill that a lot of engineers are optimizing for now to get the job, which is valid. But 5 years out, as AI and LLM tools start to become more involved in our day-to-day, they won't fully replace programmers ever, because the job of an engineer is to solve for complexity, not to write code. Code is just the formalization step of solving complexity for an organization. Thank you. But what's going to be required is that engineering mindset. And to do the engineering very well, to set yourself apart after you've been in the game for a couple of years, is creativity. It's the polar opposite of what most people think of when they think of computer science, especially coming from my arts background. People thought it was weird that I was getting into computer science, like it was a hard pivot, but that is how you can become excellent at what you do, is through becoming creative in your work. And the way you do that is through engaging in the arts, either by yourself or even consuming the arts, things that challenge you, things that push your mind to think and consider in different ways, whether that's films or music or plays, whatever strikes your fancy. But yeah, folks that aren't engaging in creative pursuits or creative consumption of a bit of an unusual nature, let's say, are going to be, I think, left really far behind, because they're not going to be as creative as folks that are, which will be the key differentiator in about 5 years.
I'm so happy you said that. Have you read this book called The Artist Way?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Oh my goodness. It's like creativity is so important, and creativity comes from honestly like getting outside, like picking up a book or doing something that's like tangible and like real world, and it takes you away from the computer. Time for you to reflect, time for you to like look internally and see the world in a different light and produce whatever you want, whether it's music or a painting or something. But it's insane to, it's crazy to me to think that the way to be your best self, like when it comes to like computer science and technology and your career in tech and software engineering, is to step away from the tool that you use to do your actual work.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. People treat it like the end all be all, but it's mistaking a picture of food for food, I think.
I agree. Well, Josh, thank you so much for your time today. This has been an illuminating conversation, and there are some terms that you use, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to Google that.
Oh
So I
no.
really
Oh no.
appreciate your time.
I appreciate it, Fee. Thank you so much for having me on. Really enjoyed doing this.
Of course.